Hi everybody. Tonight we are going to go over the second part of supply and demand, and that is supply. We're also going to be talking about equilibrium, so what happens when the supply and demand curves come together. To move into supply, let's take a quick review of what we studied today around the demand schedule. So as you see here just in class, schedule that shows price per bushel and the quantities demanded per week according to those various prices. See the graph down below? There is plotting each of those points, so 5 and 10, 4 and 20, and so on. Connect those and we get a demand curve. Now let's take a look at the supply schedule. So here I've gone ahead and plotted each of the numbers, the combinations of numbers that correspond to the various amounts that suppliers will supply or manufacturers will supply at a given cost. And you'll notice here that there is a positive relationship between the price that's being offered on the market and the amount that a supplier will produce at that price. So what happens when I do the same thing for the supply schedule? I take a look here at prices per bushel, quantity supplied. Notice the positive relationship between the amount that is being commanded in the market and the amount that a supplier is willing to supply. As the price goes up, producers will produce more. Connect those dots and you get what becomes our, properly labeled here, of course, our supply curve. That shows again the combination of quantities supplied and price that make up this market. Now, just like the demand schedule had a propensity to move, had factors that would change it, so does the supply schedule. So let's take a look at change in supply versus change in quantity supplied. A change in quantity supplied, so movement along the supply curve, just like we had movement along the demand curve, happens when change in the price of a good results in a change in the quantity supplied. So as the price of something goes up, in this case from, it looks like about $1.50 to maybe $2.75, that will result in an increase in the amount produced or the amount supplied. So A to B is a change in the quantity supplied, in this case an increase. A couple of examples of that. An increase in the price of airline tickets will result in an increase in the quantity of airline seats. So if airlines see that the prices are going up, they are more likely to add more flights, which allows them to add more seats. On the other side, a decrease in the price of a bottle of bottled water will result in a decrease in the quantity of bottled water supplied. So you take this arrow and turn it over, and you're going to see what happens as you decrease price. So that's movement along the supply curve. Let's look at the factors that would actually result in a change in supply. So remember that a change in the amount supplied at any price. Okay, factors that shift supply. First, changes in input prices, assuming a particular product price. So don't make assumptions around change in the specific product itself, but change in the inputs to that product. So, for example, an increase in the price of sand, because I love the example of sand, shifts the supply curve of concrete to the left. Leftward shift in the supply curve means a decrease in the amount supplied. Why? Well, sand is an input to concrete, and if the sand price goes up, that means the price of the entire product goes up. So change in input prices will tend to shift the supply of the finished product to the left. Similarly, a decrease in the price of corn shifts the corn syrup supply curve to the right. Why is that? Well, the price of my input changes. In this case, decrease. It's going to shift the supply curve of corn to the right, meaning that they are going to want to supply more. Second, technology improvements. Well, technology improvements enable firms to produce units of output with fewer resources. So what they used to do with a lot of resources now takes fewer, and fewer resources reduce the cost of production. Well, what does that do? Reduced costs will shift the supply curve to the right and increase supply. For example, technological advances in the production of flat screen monitors, so the monitors that we use for computers or televisions, shifts the supply curve to the right. Why is that? Well, because technology advances push prices down, input prices, and this one, unlike number one, where we're just talking about a straight price change, we're talking about the actual technology improvement in number two that allows firms to produce units of output with fewer resources. Implication there, of course, that the price is going down. Number three, an increase in taxes and subsidies either increases or decreases the cost of production and will move the supply curve one way or the other. So, for example, a new county tax in effect increases the cost of doing business. If my costs go up, I will tend to supply less, so that supply curve is going to shift to the left. Another example, a government subsidy. Subsidy is something that the government gives out either in the form of cash or in reduction of other costs, lowers my costs and shifts the supply curve to the right. Why does it go to the right? Well, because as my price of production goes down, I am going to tend to produce more, and an increase in the quantity supplied shifts my supply curve to the right. Okay, a few more factors that shift supply. Price of related goods. So when a producer sells several related products, the quantity of any one good it is willing to supply at any given price depends on the prices of its other co-produced goods. So here's what we're talking about here. A producer of sports balls, let's say they make soccer balls and basketballs and footballs and baseballs, they may decide to produce fewer soccer balls and more basketballs. Well, if they do this, they're going to produce fewer soccer balls. That's going to result in a decline or a leftward shift in the supply of soccer balls. We're concerned here less about why they made this decision and the fact that they made the decision. So if they're producing fewer soccer balls because they think they can make more money on another ball, well, fine. Then they're going to decrease the number of soccer balls, shifting that curve to the left. And it's that shift that we're concerned with. Number five, producer expectations. Just like consumer expectations can shift the demand curve, changes in producer expectations can shift the supply curve. So changes in expectations of the future price of a product. So just like, again, we could shift our demand curve as consumers by wanting or not wanting that product or buying or not buying that product. Producers can do the same thing. Two examples. If wheat farmers think prices will go up later in the season, they may hold back their supply, literally not put their supply on the market. That's going to decrease supply, shift the curve to the left. If TV manufacturers forecast increased holiday demand for a product, if they think they can sell a lot more, they may increase production now in the summertime or early fall, thereby shifting that supply curve way to the right. Number six, more suppliers. Generally speaking, and this is just sort of a rule to get used to, more sellers means more supply, at least in the short run. More sellers in the market supplying more products generally will shift the curve to the right. Think of, for example, China opening its market to makers of foreign cars, so GM and Chrysler and Maserati and other makers. That increased the supply of autos for sale in China, moved that entire supply curve to the right. Think also of something like a farmer's market. If there are two suppliers there, they each have a table full of tomatoes. If you have 10 suppliers, they're going to have 10 tables. Even if they're not full of tomatoes, you will have more tomatoes there than you did before. Okay, let's talk now about equilibrium, where supply meets demand, I like to call it. Equilibrium price, let's get that definition down. Equilibrium price is the price that matches the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded. So think of where the two graphs come together. It's also known as the market clearing price. Market clearing price generally refers to the price at which the market can clear all of the goods that are being offered. Let's take a look at it in a graph. So using the price per bushel that we discussed earlier, here we have prices per bushel, quantity supplied at that price, and quantity demanded. Well, equilibrium simply is the combination of the demand curve and the supply curve. And in this case, the demand curve and the supply curve come together where $3 is the price. And at $3 price, suppliers will supply 35 bushels of whatever that product is, corn or wheat or something else. Now, let's talk about what happens if we get out of that equilibrium price and why this equilibrium price exists. Well, let's talk about what happens if the price increases from $3 to $4. Again, not concerned about what caused the price increase, but if the price goes up, to $4, what's going to happen? Well, looking at our equilibrium, you're going to have a disconnect in the amount supplied and the amount demanded. The amount supplied, because of the positive relationship between price and amount supplied, suppliers would be inclined to produce closer to 45 bushels of the product. While at the same time, because of the inverse relationship between demand and price, consumers are going to demand fewer. So at $4, they'll demand 20 units, but suppliers are going to produce 45 units. So that creates what we call a surplus, more available in the market than people are willing to buy. Conversely, let's look at what happens if the price is set below the equilibrium price. Well, in this case, price goes down to $2. Looking again at the supply curve, suppliers will produce 20 because of the positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. But look out here, consumers are going to demand a much greater amount because of the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So they'll be out here demanding around 55 units, but producers will be supplying only 20 units. So we'll get a shortage indicated by this distance, a shortage in the amount supplied. Okay, so that's going to do it tonight for the supply side of supply and demand and definition of equilibrium. Have a great night.